everyone, and welcome to another day on Cornwall Pocket Farm, where I try and figure out how to live sustainably on 300 square metres in the city. So what are we doing today? Well, I thought I would bring you up to speed, bring you up to date with how my tomato experiment is going. I'll put a link to the video up here where I kicked off the experiment and talked about the variations that I was trying and what I was hoping to get out of each one. And some of that has worked. We did get early tomatoes and the plants really weren't very happy, but one is still alive. And then of course I did put variations of protected and unprotected and early and late tomatoes in the garden, in the kitchen garden, and they have, interesting. Come along and have a look what's happened. Not quite what I expected, but realistically this weather is not quite what I expected either. We don't seem to have had the psyllid bug yet. But to be honest, if I was a psyllid bug, I don't think I'd come down from Northland yet either. The weather has just been horrid. It's been wet and it's been cold, which means that the protection that I created in that marquee has sort of not been required really. But it has had other benefits and some negatives. So come along and I'll show you. And I'm also going to show you what I've done with those pots I found the other day. Again, I'll put a link to that video up above. Come along and I'll show you. You can see now that the tomatoes at the front of the house have, the ones that were in pots, they've all finished now. They were doing really well and they provided us with tomatoes from the beginning of November all the way through till Christmas pretty much, but they did die, as you saw. This is the only remaining tomato. When I cleared them all up, it wasn't quite dead, so I chopped it off really low down and it came away again. As you can see, we now have new flowers on it. Now that's the marquee, obviously, which was another one of my strategies, and unfortunately, as you can see from the top, it no longer goes to a point as it did when I first made it. I was amazed that the marquee actually still is standing. I mean, it was swaying so badly, but it did rub through on the top. But I can't do anything about that now until the end of the season, and then I'll have to patch it. I hope you can see through the net. I'm getting some lovely tomatoes on the plants in the marquee, but they're just not ripening, or they're ripening very slowly. And as soon as we have some rain, they split. So the chickens have been enjoying lots of tomatoes, I have to say, which has made me very sad. So what you can see here is that I've actually got the door open on it at the moment. The main problem I'm having is really to do with dampness. They're quite, I don't know if you can see, maybe you can see on that stem, possibly not. They've sort of got grey mould on them. It's not been a great year for tomatoes. I think anybody in New Zealand will tell you, or certainly in Auckland will tell you that. However, it has been a success because if I turn you round, those tomatoes there, as you can see, are quite short, but they went in the ground before the ones in the marquee did. So the whole point of this marquee was to protect against psyllid, and it doesn't seem to have arrived this year. But what it has done is provided that extra protection that the tomatoes have got really big and really tall. So the marquee has protected the tomatoes from the birds pecking at them, and I haven't had to go around putting these covers on all the trusses of tomatoes, so that has been great. But yesterday I did open this door because I thought, well, let's try it to see if we get better pollination. Now it's dried up a little bit and you can see we have lots of flowers on the tomatoes, so I'm hoping that pollinators can get in there and maybe pollinate more of the flowers. So these ones were the last ones I put in the ground, and if you look on the December tour, you'll see how small they were in December. They have really started to pick up now and are growing very strongly. So they were my late sowing and late planting. There's a little bit of grey mould, but they do seem to be doing quite well. So potentially this year, late sowing outside seems to be better than early sowing outside. Although the early sowing outside they are producing tomatoes where these are a way of producing tomatoes. And then the other ones I put in, excuse my jungle here, I've got a bit of a bean and squash jungle. Hello Maggie, you're just walking through. Yeah, cameo appearance there. So these, I don't know, can you even see them? Here, let me move the leaves. These here, these are tomatoes here. So I've got 2 tomatoes at the end there. They went in, they were the latest tomatoes to go in, to be honest. But they are in a sunny bed. This one over here, France and Italy, the tomato bed and the pumpkin bed, they are the sunny beds. They obviously get more sunlight than these 2 beds at the back, which are Germany and England. They don't get quite as much sun. So I suppose I would imagine that these tomatoes would do a little better. So I have had fruit off the tomatoes in the marquee over there, and I have had fruit off the first sown tomatoes, the marmons in the UK. Hi Maggie. Maggie's got a stick. Have you got a stick, Maggie? Oh, yeah, got a stick. But the jury is out really as to what has been a success and what hasn't. We haven't had psyllid hit yet. Shall I say yet? So I've opened the door in the marquee because I figure, well, even if the psyllid comes down now, it really affects the growth, but most of those tomatoes are as big as they're going to be anyway. So yeah, I've opened up the front door to see if I get pollinators in, and it might be that the power of the marquee is actually with the door open, so that we get the pollinators in, but we get the protection of that mesh, which seems to have been the best thing about it, to be honest. The other thing I should catch you up on, which is pretty exciting, is the pots that I got. You know, I found in my last video, I put a little segment in about the free pots that I found on the side of the road, which was great. I did manage to extricate the cabbage tree from the pot. Very exciting. So I've planted the cabbage tree. I'll show you how that looks in a minute. And I've put the pot in one of my garden beds. How cool does that look? Major surgery. It took me several hours of sawing off some pretty serious roots and really excavating it with my hands because I couldn't get a trowel in there. But eventually I managed to get it free and pull out all these roots. But there was a sizable root ball left underneath the plant. So I put it in the chicken coop because obviously it's a native and this is my native planting area. I'm hoping that it's going to take, although I've done a lot of research and it seems to be that they're pretty hardy. You can like literally chop the top off and stick it in some soil, I think, and it should take. So I am hopeful. Hello girlies, have you come to see what's going on? You're on video. Yeah. I've put the rocks around the base because the chickens do love a bit of sort of disturbed soil to start scratching and digging. The other thing is the Muhlenbeckia, I don't know if you can see, the Muhlenbeckia here. I have moved the bird cage onto that and taken away the sort of the makeshift bits of wire over the top because it was getting so big, to be perfectly honest. So that's there now because I have taken it off the Hebe. That Hebe, when I first put it in the ground, the chickens went straight for it and started eating all the leaves. It was a sick plant because I'd got it off the almost dead rack at Mitre 10. So I put it in the ground and covered it with a bird cage so that it could really get established. And I think they've got used to it being there because when I took the bird cage off, they had a couple of little pecks and then I've completely left it alone. So yeah, that's a win. And then it meant that I could move the bird cage over there to cover the Muhlenbeckia and take away the bits of scrappy wire. It had started to grow through that, so the bird cage works better now for the Muhlenbeckia. And here I have planted, I don't know if you can see, I have planted the snail vine in the ground, and it's been sitting in a pot for so long. It was such a sad looking thing. I put it in the ground thinking, well, if it survives, it survives. It's right next to the compost. If it wasn't going to be very healthy and happy, the slugs would take it out in a minute. But they haven't, so that's pretty good. I put in some string this last weekend, and I've also put a wire all the way along the front of the chicken coop. So I'm hoping that it'll grow tall and go around the front of the chicken coop. It is supposed to be a perennial, but I don't know whether that means that it will die back and come away again each year, or whether once it's up on that wire, it stays up and alive. We will see, because I've put that wire around temporarily to stop the chickens until it gets sort of up that string and established. But if it grows out of the ground every year, obviously I'll need to come up with a different solution. It's making good progress up that string. It just shot away when I put it in the ground. So obviously in need of some cool root run and a bit of space to roam. So where did I put the pot? Well, here. I thought it would look really lovely. I haven't got anything actually planted in it yet. I still don't know what to put in that yet. It needs to be something fairly low, and it would need to be something maybe that tumbled over the sides as well. So if you have any ideas, please put a comment below and let me know what you think would be good in this pot. So I'm quite pleased with it. So from the gate, it's rather lovely and leads down the path. It'll also, I think, add interest. You know, in the winter when lavender starts to look all a bit sad, I think the pot will draw your eye rather than looking at the sad lavender. And then in the summer, when the flowers, well, summer, in a normal summer, when it's nice and hot and dry, hopefully we'll have some beautiful lavender flowers swaying around that pot. So very pleased about that. I put those square pots just either side of the step that comes out of the bedroom French doors. It just seemed to fit perfectly. If you see the way that that pot over there fits in that space, it was almost made for it. And of course then the other one at the other side makes a nice little pair. Again, I have no idea what to plant in here. So in the summer, these pots are relatively shaded, but in the winter they will be in full sun. So I'm not quite sure what to plant. They're not very big, these pots, so it can't be anything with a large root run. Again, put comments down below if you've got any ideas. I have no clue at the moment. And then the succulent pot has slotted in beautifully here. Looks just the part, and it's just underneath my other succulents up above. Well, that's where we are at the moment. As you can see from the garden, some things are working and some things aren't. I mean, the biggest thing for me is actually the learning experience as well, because I don't know if I've shared this with you, but before I started Cornwall Pocket Farm, i.e. like the last 3 years, I was not a gardener. I had no clue about any of this sort of stuff. We lived in the city for 10 years and of course didn't garden at all. Before that I did have a bit of a garden, but it was very much a small raised bed where I got a few punnets of vegetable seedlings from the local big box store and just sort of popped in a few lettuce, maybe a tomato plant or two in the summer, and then just sort of let it do its thing. That was it. I never sown from seed or anything like that. So this has been a real adventure for me, and that's why the beginning, I say, where I'm trying to figure out how to live sustainably on 300 square meters, because I really don't know what I'm doing. I am learning as I go along. I am making it up. I am experimenting. I'm trying things, which is why I've done this tomato experiment. And also, by the by, if you're not a gardener and you would like to do something like this, just go for it. I have learned everything that I know from YouTube. If you look on my YouTube channel, there's a little tab at the top labeled channels. If you click on that, you will see all the channels, the gardening channels that I follow, and that's how I learn what to do in my garden. Obviously it's from different countries, so I've had to adapt things a little bit and figure out what happens in my environment. And of course my environment keeps changing, so that's not helpful. But yeah, just don't feel that if you've never been a gardener, that you can't just start. You can just learn it on YouTube and give it a go. If there are any plans, you know, if they die, they die. I've got a very laissez-faire approach to this all really now. I put it in and I go on then, grow. And if it grows, then great. If it doesn't, then I put something else in. You know, mostly things just kick off and they're quite happy. So yeah, this is all about learning. And we've got tomatoes. So I am getting tomatoes, not a lot at the moment, but since, say, the beginning of November, I have had a constant stream of tomatoes for eating. I haven't had enough for processing to make relishes and pasta sauces yet, but we certainly have had enough tomatoes to keep us in eating tomatoes. So, you know, that's a win to me. So I'm hoping now, as the weather is getting sunnier and hotter, that the tomatoes will pick up and maybe have a late flush, and then maybe produce enough tomatoes that I can process a load to go in the freezer. That is the idea, and that's what I'm hoping for. So hopefully that's been informative or interesting, useful in some way to you, just to see where I'm at with my tomato experiment. I'll do a wrap up, a wash up at the end of the year, and really look back and see how everything has worked when I have all the information in. And then obviously from that I will figure out what I'm going to do next year. But yeah, hopefully that's been helpful. And if you've enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if this sort of thing is interesting to you. Following along with me trying to figure out my tomato experiments and how to, well, live more sustainably on 300 square meters in the city. So see you next time, everyone. Goodbye.